unmute. There we go. We are unmuted now. So, Scott, give me a thumbs up if you can hear us. All right, we're good. Perfect. Okay. Anyway, so I have been working in RMAD for the last 2.5 years now. So before that, I was in the watershed division. I was there for 10 years, doing TMDLs and RAPs and 319 grants and all kinds of watershed-related work, where I started working on chloride. So that was my first introduction. Was back in 2008. I started a project kind of looking at the impacts of chloride and trying to understand kind of where it's coming from. What are we going to do about it? And then I also was the project manager for a 319 grant with Fortin Consulting for a training program. So that kind of just threw me right into the chloride world, and I have been there ever since. So I just want to talk a little bit today. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the impacts of chloride on the environment. I think that a lot of us here in this room probably are aware of that. If you feel like you want more background on that, I am more than happy to get that to you. But I wanted to spend most of today just kind of updating everybody on what I've been up to. And now I know you guys all hopefully know that chloride is in the agency's strategic plan. And I know that sometimes people are like, well, what's going on with that? What are we doing? I haven't heard anything. So since I'm right in the middle of it, I figured I would share what I know about our strategic plan goals, what progress we're making, and then just kind of keep you up to date on some of the other work I've been doing, and hopefully get some ideas from all of you on what else can we do as an agency to address this important problem. So please, let's keep this informal. Let's have conversations as we go, and hopefully it'll be a great talk. So just the basics. I can't leave this out. Even when I try, I'm like, oh, I just can't take this very basic information that 230 milligrams per liter is the standard for chloride, which is designed to protect aquatic life. Chloride, doesn't go away. It's essentially a permanent pollutant. It stays attached to those water molecules. Wherever they go, the chloride goes. And as Mark had mentioned, there was a study actually by the University of Minnesota back in 2008 that looked at the amount of chloride entering the Mississippi River and the amount of chloride leaving at the end of the Twin Cities metro area. And they found that 78% of the chloride that we are using in the metro area is staying around here locally. So that was kind of a game changer for me when I started working on this back in 2008. And then we are seeing it in our shallow aquifers. Sherry Cronin has some great maps and charts and data on the amount of chloride we're seeing in our aquifers. And we also have seen some impacts on lake mixing. We've got one lake in particular, Brownie Lake, which has got a lot of problems, but it is merromintic. So Brownie Lake no longer mixes, and the concentrations of chloride in the deepest part of Brownie Lake can be up to 800 milligrams per liter. I don't know if there's new data, Miranda. I don't know, but it's pretty high. It's and I don't know what we're going to do. How are we going to ever get that chloride out? So we do not want our lakes to go merromintic. The reason that's happening is because salt water, of course, is heavier than fresh water. And so once you get especially with Brownie Lake, it's a very deep and narrow lake. So it's just challenging for that water to mix anyway. And so when you make that heavier water on the bottom, it's even more challenging. So another lake, Tanner's Lake, is 3 times a year, and it used to mix 3 times a year. And that is on our impaired waters list for chloride. So we are seeing those impacts, and now there's some new research by the University of Minnesota looking at stormwater ponds. And they have found that some of the ponds that are now starting to release phosphorus also have high chloride in them. There was some shading, some other things they think that were impacting that, but chloride is definitely now starting to limit our stormwater ponds' abilities to effectively release. That is another kind of up and coming negative side effect of chloride. And I usually have a slide here of all of the great, aquatic life that we're protecting for the people who like to have that visual, but you guys all know, right? The fish, bugs, the plants are all super important, and we want to protect them all. Here's a great graphic that actually our communications folks put together for a state fair exhibit we did a few years ago. Just highlighting what all the sources are. So I think for the last 10 years, our focus has been de-icing salt, and the last 5 years we've really kind of shifted to try to better understand water softening as a contributor. And we have several wastewater treatment facilities who do have high chloride in their discharge. So I would say, from an agency perspective, de-icing salt and water softeners are kind of our 2 primary sources that we're really putting a lot of work towards and trying to address. But we cannot forget about fertilizer and dust suppressant. Those are common sources of chloride as well. Potassium chloride is where the fertilizer comes in. And so potassium chloride is the most common form to receive potassium. So even like when you go buy fertilizer at your local hardware store, that potassium number on there is usually going to be potassium chloride or potash, which is going to be in it. And dust suppressant. So calcium chloride is a very common dust suppressant. And the reason that is kind of the go-to item for that is because it has the ability to attract moisture from the air. So when they put that calcium chloride on the gravel roads in the summer, over the next several weeks, it'll continue to pull moisture to itself and keep that gravel road damp. So it is actually very effective as a dust suppressant, but then of course that chloride behaves like all of the other sources and will, once it's with water, it's going to go wherever the water goes. So those are our kind of main sources of chloride that we're kind of focusing on.
You mentioned manure. You had manure up
Yes.
there? Can you say it?
Manure.
Talked about that.
Yeah, so that was in, I'll have you in this next graph here, we'll actually show you the breakdown. So livestock waste here comes in at 6%. So it's a small percentage statewide, but it's still there. And I don't know if that's just natural, if we're feeding our, livestock potato chips. I don't know. So that's something that, we will look into in the future, but right now we're kind of focusing on water softening industrial sources, better understanding that, knowing that manure is something that is on our radar and is interesting and would be great to better understand why is manure high in chloride.
Is that from like manure lagoons or just open pastures along streams? Is that enough of an input to 6% seems like a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. That's why we put it on the little sources because it's enough to mention it. But so this chart here is from the University of Minnesota. They got an LCCMR grant 3 years ago, and Alicia Overbo, who is now with Department of Health, so that's great because now I still get to work with her and stuff. She's Department of Health. And so this is where she kind of evaluated all of the sources of chloride that had never been done before for our state. And there's not like there's just like, readily available data set to work with, right? So she had to use purchasing records. So like all of the water softening salt that's purchased with like de-icing salt, all of that is based off purchasing records. She used some USGS data and information that they had on salt sales. The Salt Institute was not forthcoming with data, so she had to find it on her own. So I think there's some opportunities in the future to kind of, tighten this up and better understand this. But I think, just seeing here that, and I'll point, I can't. I was at a presentation yesterday and they actually had a screen and I could use my little pointer and now I'm like, oh, right, can't use it here. So this 22% here of wastewater treatment plants, a lot of that's going to be water softening salt. So then this residential, septic systems, kind of combine those because the septics, most of the chloride coming through a septic is going to be from their water softeners in their home. So those two sources are going to largely be due to water softeners. Yeah.
Would you be able to put the permitted industries in there as well, or where would their chloride?
Yeah. So right now for industrial permit, we have the orange, and that one is it. So that one again, I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve this as we move forward. But this was a really good first attempt at trying to quantify the amount of salt in the state of Minnesota. For me personally, I think that I would rather focus on sources within a watershed. Like what is the source that's impacting kind of big picture that, we've got some significant sources of chloride in our state. So, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to contribute. We're with the Metropolitan Council, and we did some long-term trends in our rivers, and we found at Minnesota River at Jordan, which is at the right at the start of the metro area, we saw fairly large concentrations of chloride, and then that they're going way up, and so we've sort of been saying this is from fertilizer, but I think it's really useful for us to see 23%, like that's more than I think I was thinking. And that really, I think, goes a long way to explain why we're seeing that. Because I think we keep thinking this is a metro problem, and that's why we're really concerned, but it is getting a lot higher coming in.
Yeah, and that was for me, that was the big takeaway with this fertilizer. Is okay, what are we missing? Because I'm not seeing a bunch of chloride impairments in coastal areas. Are we not collecting chloride in those areas? Is it going through groundwater? And I know that we only, like MDA, right? MDA does the monitoring for groundwater in agricultural areas. Do they do chloride?
Excuse me, Brooke, we need everybody to mute themselves just in the background because we're getting a lot of feedback here of other people talking over the microphone. I can't hear you.
Some of their wells are near more major roadways, so they can get access to the fields because they're right at the edge of the fields, and it's going to be nearly, impossible to get a site right in the middle of a farmer's field.
Right. So this is, for us, this is where we actually, I have a project underway right now, and I have one of our consultants digging into this. We've got a team together, we've got Department of Ag on that team, we found some other local kind of agricultural experts to help us better understand this particular source, because that is a big chunk, and it's kind of a mystery to me. Why are we not seeing more chloride impairments in agricultural areas? So I suspect perhaps we just aren't looking in the right spots, the right time of year, but I'm sure it's there. We just haven't not seen it yet. So yeah, so this is really great research because it really helps us kind of get a better understanding. And then now we know kind of what each community needs to consider. When they're looking at reducing chloride, what sources should they be looking at and digging into further to better understand? But yes, those industrial sources is something I would like to get a better handle on and try to better understand. We have this general list of here's the type of industries that we believe has potential to have higher chloride in their discharge, but we're going to need to kind of figure out how do we start to actually get that chloride data from those industrial facilities.
I would just say in general, I've looked at every wastewater plant that has chloride monitoring data, and industries tend to discharge very little chloride. There's some exceptions like pickle factories, but like that they're going out of business.
What? Pickle factories are going out of business? I love pickles.
You need a slide on this, Brooke.
I know, I just oh, my mind is so, he just very nonchalantly they're going out of business. Like, what? Big news, Scott.
Here's the paper.
Okay.
But yeah, the industries generally don't use a huge amount of chloride. Not a huge source, somewhat counterintuitively, but there was some notable exceptions.
Yeah. Well, so like one community, Rogers, had a Green Corps member, which I'm going to talk about, and their Green Corps member was helping them evaluate chloride. And they were going on this track of, we're going to do a rebate program for our homeowners. And I was like, hold on, if you evaluated all your sources, before you start trying to convince people to spend money to upgrade their water softeners, you better be sure that that's what you will need to do in order to meet your future chloride permit limit. And after evaluation of their large water users, they actually found they had the highest chloride discharge from a metal fabrication facility. So they used saltwater baths, a hotel that had laundering facilities, and a car wash. So those were their three biggest water users. And so now they've kind of redirected and they're actually going to focus on how can they work with those three businesses, industries to kind of address the sources. And the saltwater baths, I found out, our small business assistance program actually kind of promotes that as an alternative to some of the chemicals. And so that was great conversation because Gary was like, I didn't know saltwater baths were. I was like, well, if there's a better option, she's like, yeah, we can start recommending a water base. And I was like, perfect. So that's where these conversations are great because we can make those connections because I had no idea that saltwater baths was part of metal fabrication. Here's a fabulous graph that Emily was mentioning. I always like to share this one because this is really great data for this long term. So this is about a 30-year period here, and you can see all the red triangles is showing the increase in chloride, and then this line here is the trend line. This trend line is showing you kind of how chloride has been increasing. And this one is, always interesting to me. I always wonder if the development going on in Wisconsin in the Prescott area isn't contributing to that 143% increase. But again, up in Stillwater, 110% increase. And so, the concentrations are still low. They're close to 30, I believe, milligrams per liter. So we're still really well below that threshold. But to see 110% increase in chloride is a dramatic increase. Yes?
Do you know where the sampling point is?
I don't, but I suspect Emily might.
Actually, I haven't been up. Who's asked that? It's I think we're off the ridge there, I'm pretty sure. Or do we have I think it may depend on the part of the season. I think we may be on a boat for some of it, and we may be off the bridge.
So is it downstream? Is it being the
So
same
it's,
influence, or is
well, so it's right, it's like, it would be on like the upstream part of the bridge, like,
so it's pretty much the same?
yeah. I mean, yes, sorry. That is St. Croix at Prescott. So we don't monitor the Mississippi at Prescott, we monitor at Lock and Nymph. So it is just the St. Croix.
And then I have our map here. I also heard, Cassie was at a meeting that I was at yesterday from my council, and she had said that they're working on some trend analysis for local streams. So I think Bassett Creek was first on their list. They have been doing chloride trends in some of our local streams that they'll be pulling together some information for local partners to utilize. So I'm looking forward to that data as
Yeah,
well.
we actually have some fairly agricultural, like Bevins, Carver. So those will be interesting. I think those are later on the list, but those will be interesting to see whether we're seeing any of that agricultural influence that I wasn't expecting, if we're seeing that there.
Yeah, that would be great, because Sand Creek, Bevins, those are all
Those are-
impaired. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Scott County.
Well, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, down here. These ones.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
There they are.
So that's an agricultural. Bevins is quite agricultural. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, they also, from what I've heard, their Seneca food waste is in that area, and they do land apply their food waste.
Mm.
So that, I mean, I don't know if you compared potassium chloride to food waste, because there's definitely gonna be chloride
Yeah.
in food waste. Maybe it's better, worse, like that's just the kind of questions that we need to like start having to better understand, like, should we be recommending certain things over others? So this is showing you our current condition of chloride impairments across the state. We have 50 impaired water bodies and another 75 that are within 10% of that standard. And I will say that, you see obviously a lot of them clustered here in the metro area. Well, we have 2/3 of the population and we've been developed for several years. Well, also 80% of the total available data on chloride is from the metro area. Because, right, we have a bunch of amazing partners who are also collecting chloride data and sharing that with us, where once we leave the metro area, we have a few partners maybe, but it's mostly relying on MPCA staff to go out and collect this data. So I think like these ones are all new here. These weren't here like 3 years ago. I think these were, but these ones out here, these high-risk ones were not here. So I think that maybe as we collect more data, we might start to see more of these impairments, high-risk situations start popping up.
So I just wanted to point out for context that in Minnesota, the natural chloride concentrations would be less than 5, non-detect less than 1. Certainly, if you could go back 400 years and sample the water, you wouldn't probably be able to detect chloride almost everywhere in Minnesota, except for some isolated areas
Right,
in
which I think is this one up
western
here,
Minnesota.
that one way up there.
So anything above 5 is because of humans.
Except for, places like northwestern
North, yep.
Minnesota where there's old relic seawater from a long time ago that naturally moves upward, and also a little bit southwestern Minnesota too.
So that's, I think that one up there is like definitely up there. It's like Joe River, I feel like, right? The impaired waters list memorized, I guess. For chloride, not all the other, impairments. Wow, that would be quite the feat to memorize that list.
I had a quick question, speaking of northwestern Minnesota and that too. So with the agricultural use, are you just solely attributing it to fertilizer, or are you looking at like evaporated enriched irrigation recharge return to surface water bodies or to shallow groundwaters?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for ideas and help to better understand some of these impairments, because I think, like I said, there's the obvious ones, the de-icing salt, the water softening. We got some pretty obvious indications of where that chloride's coming from. But once we get into some of these other sources, it starts to get a little more like, well, where is the fertilizer going? And are there other things? Like the dust suppressant was something that, we came across, I think it was maybe 6 years ago in some of our trainings with the winter maintenance professionals who also do gravel road maintenance. And we were like, oh, you guys are using calcium chloride. Like that's a pretty important source, especially with all the mining activities going on in Minnesota. I think that dust suppressant is probably a bigger contributor as well. So yeah, if you have ideas for, especially if it's like a local area where you're like, this might be a particular problem, please share that with me. And, we'll see how we can incorporate that into the work we're doing.
I've seen it in arid and semi-arid states, in Dakotas and in Idaho, it's a big issue out there.
Okay.
with doing So it'd have to be in the drier parts of Minnesota, but you do see pretty significant evaporative enrichment as this stuff penetrates down, especially in those Red River Valley clays. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that. So, see this.
Do you know, Brooke,
Yeah.
Douglas County, what's going on with those couple?
These ones?
Yes.
That's Alexandria.
Yeah.
There's a chain of lakes there. There's a Alexandria waste discharge place. What is their name? Alexandria Sanitary. ALAS. Yes, okay. They are discharged to those lakes. So that's the issue there. Those have been on the list for a while now. I don't know that they have a chloride limit in their permit yet? Yes.
They do, yes.
Are they doing the variance?
They asked for variance.
Okay. So we will get to that in a little bit here. So I wanted to share this with all of you. So I have been working on chloride for several years in watershed, through kind of TMDL and RAPS work, but also through that 319 grant that I would imagine that kind of has this like pseudo PCA training program that we had our name on, but we didn't, weren't really doing a ton with it. It was more the 319 grant was hiring a consultant and they were partnering with local partners. And so we created, I think we had a team of managers and staff from different water-related programs to come up with this MPCA chloride strategy. So this was shortly after we came out with the Twin Cities Metro Area Chloride Management Plan, and where we kind of worked with our local partners to kind of help everybody understand what they could do about chloride and the impacts it was having. And we also at that time had 38 chloride TMDLs that were completed. So we gave out a lot of waste load allocations to permitted entities as well. So right after that, we decided to do our own internal, what is our chloride strategy? Like, we recognize that the MPCA has a huge role, a huge potential to contribute to helping reduce this pollutant. And so we came up with an internal kind of plan to move our agency forward. And here is a nice graph that was created that kind of shows all the different programs and kind of where chloride connects with them. But this is kind of where we highlighted some of where we need some additional work. Where does our agency need to put some of our focus and our efforts on? So this was back in April of 2017. And then in 2018, chloride was on the agency's strategic plan. So as you can see here, it's under the water, reduced chloride entering surface waters and groundwaters. It's the first one, so clearly it's the most important. Right? That's why they put it in first. Okay, I don't know. I didn't get to decide that, but I'm just going to go with that's why. Right? All right. So here's like the overall strategic plan, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dig in a little bit to the specific chloride one, since that's the one that I am involved in. So it was kind of a good experience for me. I've never been involved in the strategic planning and all of the work and thought that goes into these strategies, the goals, and I got really like, wait a minute, what's a strategy versus goal? Because at the end, you don't even know what the difference between a goal, a strategy, and a metric is. You're like, wait a minute. Okay, so W1, goal W1, that's our goal. So that's what I'm going to focus on. Here's the other ones that are from that first section. So now we get into the strategies. So in order to meet our overall larger picture goal of reducing chloride entering surface water and groundwater, first strategy was to reduce chloride coming from de-icing salt. Second strategy is to reduce chloride discharges through our wastewater permitting program. And the third strategy is to encourage the reduction of chloride from water softening. So we kind of tackled it by sources. And then within each source, we have a goal target. So this is where, right, it starts getting like, when people say, what's the strategy or the goal target or it's like, okay, so the goal target for de-icing salt is to increase the number of smart salt, people who are smart salting certified. Yes?
Is de-icing also including, do the plain de-icer use chloride, or is it mainly just the road?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They actually do not use chloride-containing de-icers because it's so corrosive. Yeah, so they use a non-chloride de-icer. Sometimes they'll use acetate, another one, glycol. Yeah, they'll use glycol. They're much more expensive. That's why we don't see those de-icers often used on our roads or our parking lots because they're very expensive. But the plains, that's just the chloride's too corrosive, so they do not use it.
Did they use something else for the runways then? Because I imagine they
Yeah.
de-ice.
Yep, so I think they use the same, they might use the glycol they use for the planes on the pavement, or they might use an acetate. Because acetate is not as corrosive as chloride coating. And then here you can see that the goal for, and this is, I'm just kind of letting you guys know about this, and I'm working closely with wastewater and effluent limits, but this is to kind of evaluate all of our wastewater treatment plants for reasonable potential for chloride. So they're making progress on that. And then the third one, we're back to one that falls under my work, and that is that 50% of the communities identified to need source reduction assistance with water softening receive it. So this is the most interesting one, that's for sure. So here's the graph. So I have to pull graphs together every twice a year or whatever for senior leadership to talk about. And here's one of the graphs that we did last time. And this is just showing the number of people who have been through our training program, and then the blue is our goal line. So as you can see, we've been having really great, we've been way above our goal. And the way that I set our goal was through the 319 grant, Ford Consultant requested to do 20 classes a year. I was like, okay, well, we'll just, at the time, we had no budget, we had nothing to move forward with. So I'm like, I'm just gonna be happy if we can have 20 classes a year. And then we estimate the number of people until we can get an actual database where I can manage the actual number of people a little bit better. But for right now, we're estimating it based on the number of classes. And in 2018 and 2019, there was additional 319 funds that were added to the grant we have with Ford Consulting. There was another project that wasn't able to spend all their funds, and so rather than turn those funds back to EPA, we put them into this project because this project is really easy to just do more classes. So it's easy to add, just keep the work content, the scope the same, and just do more. So we were able to far exceed our class. And so now my new goal is 60 classes a year. We had 61 classes last year, and people showed up for all of them. So there is enough demand out there, I think, for 60 classes a year. That is my new goal, but I don't know, we'll have to see if I have any increase that.
Is that across the state?
Yes. Now, we're limited historically to the metro area because it's a 319, you're supposed to be in a chloride TMDL area, and you have to have 50% match. So in greater Minnesota, we don't really have a lot of partners who are kind of jumping at the chance to spend a bunch of their own time, on helping to coordinate these trainings. And we didn't have a lot of chloride TMDLs, but as soon as they started throwing money at us, I was like, hey, we're just gonna go wherever people want training, right? This is a statewide need. I put in the statewide, or in the TCMA chloride management plan, I identified critical areas, so I was like, that's good enough for me. So far we've been fine. I'm like, we're just gonna do them wherever people want, because it's a lot of money to try to spend in a 6-8 month period that we have to spend those funds. So that has been great, but the 319 grant expires this September. So that's why you see the red here, because we do not have the budget to continue to fund the training program. We have some budget, but not enough to cover all the costs, and we do not have the ability to charge a fee. In a little bit of a pickle.
Don't go out of business.
And then here's just a slide I stole from Aaron for the wastewater, so that you guys can see kind of the progress that they're making on we're finding out a reasonable potential for all these wastewater facilities. And so here's kind of 2 different permits, and it looks like we've got a 70 to 90%. And the yellow, so they're all right, they're close to meeting their goal. And here on the map, you can see that they've got no action needing. The gray ones are the not evaluated, so that's where we still have some work to do to figure that out, but they're making great progress on evaluating wastewater facilities for reasonable potential. Right? And then here's the fun one, the providing water softening reduction assistance to 50% of the communities who need it. So first of all, who are 50% of the communities? We got to just figure that out. What does that mean? So I work closely with Elise and Scott, and okay, let's say if they're within 10% of meeting, their permit limit, that's going to qualify. If they call me and ask me for help on water softening reduction, they qualify as needed. So we're kind of, figuring it out as we go, because we don't have this nice, okay, we have 100 facilities, and these ones will be able to meet their chloride limit with only source reduction. We don't know that, and we're not going to know that because everybody's going to have to evaluate that on their own. So it's going to be a long process. So we're just going to, we're going to give assistance to as many communities as we can. And so with my definition of who needs assistance, we're already at 38%. Now, the other interesting part of this one is it's not like we have an assistance program for water softening. Like we've never had that. So I'm kind of making it up too. So we have had some Green Corps members that's helped. So that, that's assistance. We have a CWP loan program. So I'm trying to find existing programs. So if any of you guys have some great ideas of some type of assistance that you can give to communities that can qualify, I'd love to hear about it.
In the slide before this, it said general pond permit.
Yeah.
What is that?
That.
So there's broadly speaking two types of wastewater plants in Minnesota: mechanical plants that actively treat the water in ponds, which basically treat the water by holding it for half a year. And we have several hundred general ponds, and they're all permitted under a general pond permit to simplify the application process. And because they're typically small towns that run ponds, and they just permit them under a general permit.
They all work substantially similarly, so we can lump them into one. In theory, it's easier on our end to do that, in theory.
Got a question about this.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about trying to target communities by how hard their drinking water is?
So that's tricky. So Morris is on my list. I counted them because they got a Green Corps member. So they got assistance from us. But the harder the water is, like it seems more likely that centralized hardness reduction might be the only way for them to meet their permit. But like Lakefield, they are doing that, but then they want to actually get those water softeners out of their homes after they've gone online. So we're giving them assistance. So right now I'm just targeting anybody who's like ready to talk about water softening. So Elise has contacted me with a bunch of the wastewater permit writers who's thinking about chloride. And so maybe I can help them too with like helping understand their sources. And I'll talk a little bit more about a cool tool we're hoping ready for that. But so it's really, that's where it's fun. Like I like that kind of work. So it's like I'm kind of building it as I go and, just finding what the needs are. But then when they're asking me to like track it and share my metrics, and I was like, oh, okay, let's see here. Here you go. Sound good? So I make sure it's clear, like this is a moving target. It's changing. Like, we don't have like this established chloride reduction program and assistance that we just have ready, and everybody's like got their hands up and okay, I'm ready for help. Like it's a very changing and evolving kind of process relationship. All right, so what is this? Okay, so that was like the strategic plan stuff. But now, if you noticed in that April 2017, we had like our own kind of chloride strategy, and we wanted to integrate chloride right into more water programs and get chloride. My goal is to get chloride up there with nutrients and sediment. Like as an agency, we don't really think about what we're doing to reduce nutrient and sediment. Like we just do it. Like that's part of our everyday like work. That's a core part. I want chloride to be right up there with nutrients and sediment, so we don't have to think about it. So one great thing is the statewide chloride management plan. We are in the final stages of getting that ready for public notice. So I'm hoping that we will have this statewide plan, which we will be the first state to have a chloride management plan. So that's pretty exciting. A lot of other states are contacting me. That I didn't know that was going to be part of my new role, but that is. I talked to a lot of other states about what are we doing here in Minnesota and kind of helping them and sharing some of our resources. And so the goal of this is to just identify all those sources and find out what can we do, who can do what. We have a pretty robust section on kind of what everybody can do, and it's broken down by audience. So if you are a winter maintenance professional, if you are a permanent entity, if you are a policy or decision maker, like here's some things that you can do to kind of be part of the solution. We did go around the state last summer to try to get input to make sure that we are making this applicable to all of our communities across the state, because the first chloride management plan was very focused on the Southern County metro area. We were very focused on de-icing salt as a primary source and on bare pavement policy. If you go to greater Minnesota, they're not quite where we are at with the level of expectations, and we want to keep them there. We don't want them to start implementing our practices to say we use liquids, because then all of a sudden they're going to create bare pavement conditions. And if their traveling public is satisfied with 50% bare pavement, let's keep it there. So we wanted to modify that side of it, but then also try to better understand the water softening, dust suppressant, fertilizer. What can we help communities with.
So Brooke,
Yeah.
will that replace the Twin Cities management plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna still keep it like as a historical, but we've incorporated the important aspects of the
So
TCME
really,
plan.
that will be the new
That will
governing
be the
document.
new, yep,
Okay.
yep, that'll replace, I mean, we'll still keep it, for nostalgic purposes, but.
Framed on your.
Yes. I do have one of the news, I should have brought them down, a little smart salty decal on my window. So here's the map of, that we show with the regional potential. So these are the communities that we have already looked at and know that chloride, they're going to likely need a chloride limit in their permit. This over 100 number kind of changes, but it's around 100. I think last time I looked at it actually was like 88 or 90. Okay, see, it changes. And then this was some great work that was done back in April of 2017 as well, where we worked with wastewater communities to better understand, well, what are we going to do about chloride because it's a difficult pollutant. Reverse osmosis and end of the pipe is a very expensive treatment and not something that we are going to be making anybody do or encouraging anyone to do. So there was a great stakeholder process to kind of get input from these wastewater communities on how are we going to handle these chloride limits that all of you are going to get. So if you are not familiar with this, you should take a look at the policy, the recommendations that came up with, and this is kind of where I think that variance idea came out, which is now catapulted Elise into a whole fun new world of work. So I had mentioned before that Morris got a Green Corps member. So how many of you are familiar with our Green Corps program? Great, that's awesome. So a lot of you, right, we had Green Corps members last summer come and share their work. So hopefully that's helping you guys to get a better feel for the type of work that they do. But I wanted to make sure you guys all know about this. If you have partners that you work with who are eligible. So, any municipality, school districts, nonprofit organizations are eligible for a Green Corps member. The host site application is open right now through March 18th. So this is the time when somebody who wants, say like the city of Morris, who wanted a Green Corps member to help them with working on chloride reduction, this is the time when they would put in their application. So if you know of communities, I've been telling everybody, every presentation I do, I'm trying to encourage people. Obviously there's a lot of work that can be done, but chloride is under, I don't really get this one, but whatever, air pollutant reduction. I don't know what they would do for, I don't know the chloride connection there, but they say it's there, so that's great. Great infrastructure improvements, community readiness, and outreach. So those are all, there's one more category that I left out because, you can't do chloride work in there, so you just want people to do chloride. They can work on all kinds of great environmental initiatives, but you can add chloride. So we've had 5 Green Corps members right now who are working on chloride, and that's fantastic. They're all focusing on de-icing salt. So I need some water because, I got to keep that 50% number up. So I need to get a few more Green Corps members helping some communities with water softening. So if anybody, can help put any feelers out there, let people know, spread the word, that Green Corps. So that's another way we've integrated chloride, right? So we have found an opportunity in an existing program where chloride fits into it. Another program is Green Step Cities. We incorporated chloride into that actually before I started in RMAD. I worked with Phil on putting some chloride-related practices into Green Step Cities. And now we've got the chloride reduction model ordinance, which I'll mention a little bit, that is also part of the Green Step Cities. So that's another way we've integrated chloride into kind of an existing MPCA program. Right now, the draft MS4 permit is out. They just closed public comment period and are evaluating the public notice comments. So we don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but they have a lot of new chloride language in there. And so this was a great opportunity where I actually worked with stormwater MS4 staff to kind of help create some ideas that we had for what kind of chloride reduction work we could put into the draft MS4 permit. This is not like the detailed language clearly, I just gave a high level overview. Some of the things is that everybody should store their salt properly. Everybody should have a written snow and ice policy. All MS4s will have to have their staff trained. They can come to our smart salting training, of course, and we will get them all the information they need, but they can do it on their own if they choose. We also have in there an interesting one that the MS4s have to have an ordinance that says anybody else who stores salt, any businesses are storing their salt properly as well. And then education, a really focused education on chloride and what people can do, not just like a general, oh, okay, yep, environmental impacts from chloride, but here's some upcoming trainings and here more targeted education to specific audiences within their MS4 community. There also is a language in there if they have a chloride waste load allocation. I left that out, just saying that they have to track the amount of salt they're using if they have a chloride waste load allocation. We will see how this all falls out after the public notice comments. You know, I'm gonna hopefully help however I can to keep all of this in there, but we'll see. Another one is I did work with, well, it was Melissa back when she was writing the draft industrial stormwater permit, and we added this new section. So they had the proper storage in there already in the last permit, so that's fantastic. But we added this, that they should be hiring contractors, right, who know what they're doing. If they are going to have somebody do snow and ice removal on their properties, that they are using somebody who is trained and they don't have actually certified on there, but pretty close. We got there. We got a little bit, that's an improvement there. Some other programs I've been working with. Above ground storage tank, I asked a question about brine. And I was like, hey, do we have to do, are we under any regulation for brine? That's using liquid salt. And that's kind of the direction that a lot of winter maintenance professionals are going. That's the direction we want them to go, because you're using a 30% solution, about 30%. It's technically 23.3. But for different applications, it might be a little bit lower, a little bit higher. And that is, I think, the direction. If everybody was switching to primarily liquids, I think we actually could reduce our de-icing salt enough that we would be able to protect our water resources. So now they're starting to.
If everybody switched to brine?
Yes, I think brine is the way to go. I mean, granular salt, there's just so many challenges with it, and those who are effectively, like the city of Waconia uses almost 100% liquid. And now we've got, so Wisconsin's doing some research on direct liquid application, so it's actually using liquid after the storm. But right now, it's before the storm, you go out, you put a layer of brine down on the roads. You guys seen those lines sometimes on the roads? So that's like kind of greasing your frying pan. So that way when they come with the plow, they can get that snow and ice. It prevents that bond from happening, because once the ice bonds with the pavement, that's when you're spending all winter trying to get that ice and snow off of there. And so using brine is a really effective way to make mechanical removal much more efficient. So I think that mechanical removal tools and brine, that combination, I think we could really handle a lot of our winter weather conditions and eliminate most of the granular. And granular is where we see the most overuse, the improper use. They're using the wrong product for the wrong temperature. They're putting it out ahead of time, and they really shouldn't be using granular before. And so I think that, so we're using a lot more liquids. And so then I asked, because Crow Wing County was like, hey, Brooke, we're going to be getting some increased liquid storage. Just wanted to check with you. I was like, well, I would do secondary containment, but let me just double check and see if there's any other requirements. It's an other regulated substance, so that's fine, but we don't regulate the big, huge piles of granular salt. I mean, come on, it's 70% water, but okay. So I'm working with the above ground storage tank program to get some guidance. So like, how do we make sure that our winter maintenance professionals clearly understand it? Because right now when you read the website, it's like, I don't even really know. So I'm gonna make sure, I'm gonna work with them to make sure I'm interpreting the rules accurately, and then pass that information on to our winter maintenance professionals, and we're gonna teach it in our training classes. We, like I said, we are encouraging people to switch to liquids. I do not want this to discourage them. That's my only concern, is I don't want to discourage that. I also met with environmental review staff, and we've talked about some ways of how almost every project that we see, there's a chloride impact. Like if you're increasing the number of homes and you got hard water, you're going to have a whole bunch of new water softeners. If you're adding roads, you're going to have de-icing salt. So we're going to work on some language that we can start incorporating into all of our comments. So it's not like we have to rely on a certain staff person here to add in like chloride language. I'm trying to work with and have this kind of ready-made chloride language to kind of help start thinking about the chloride impacts before some of these new projects and construction activities happen. Another one, we're going to be piloting some citizen kind of monitoring effort with Isaac Walton League. So they are a nonprofit organization, and they started a salt watch program out on the East Coast. It's been very successful. They have this great map. You can go to their website and see where people are getting their readings. And so we're gonna go ahead and do a contract with them and have them kind of manage everything and just see how that goes and kind of use that as a supplement to our existing citizen monitoring program. So I don't know if anybody's checked out the website or not, but we sent it out in the newsletter to inform our citizen monitors that, hey, there's another opportunity if you're interested in chloride. So we'll see how that goes. And hopefully, that will be something that folks find effective and we can continue to evolve that as well. And then we have a chloride communications team. So there's several of us who are working on chloride kind of, on a more daily basis. Maybe not daily. Well, I mean, I think Lisa and I probably it's daily. Everybody else, it's like, once a week or something. How often are for you, Scott? Is it like? Okay. So we have a team that includes communication staff to kind of help us when we're ready to kind of come out with something that we have communication support to make sure we're getting the word out and we're just being kind of effective internally as well. So that's been pretty exciting. So then my last question is, what program am I missing? Who am I not talking to that we should start to work together and come up with some ideas for your program?
I'm sure you've already thought about the Adopt a Drain program that's kind of taking off.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of, that might have some traction.
Yeah, so I was just at Watershed Partners. That is who kind of organizes the Adopt a Drain. And I just presented on chloride at that group yesterday. So definitely thinking about external partners and how we can work with them. Did you have like a specific idea with like salt and the Adopt a Drain?
Well, I mean, once you sign up, you are now part of their, group share stuff. And now you have a group of people that, are actively looking at stormwater, protecting their, local drainage area, looking at runoff, cleaning out those drains, getting those people educated and making them like the local source of providing information about smart salt.
Yeah, that's actually a really great idea because I could send them stuff about Isaac Watt. Well, I don't know if I want to because I scraped together budget. I was like begging, like, hey, who's got a couple thousand? I want to really try this Isaac Walton League, and I didn't get a whole lot, so I only have 275 kits available for Minnesota.
Sure.
So I'm kind of thinking like, I kind of want to target outside the metro area because we know a lot about our local streams. But for the newsletter I'm going to show you, Jana Larson just asked me for a PDF, and I could be like, hey, by the way, do you want to send our new newsletter out to your network? Yeah, it's a great idea.
And then you can see where in the metro or where across the state you get these volunteers. You could see geographically where you maybe need to do more work or maybe you have active areas.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You have another idea? Question?
So this might be a little tangential, but I've noticed that this could be an educational opportunity that porta potty vendors, when they're used in the winter, a lot of them I've noticed have started to dump softener salt into the urinal part to prevent freezing.
Freezing?
So it's like
wow, that sounds
a
like
lot.
a really gross. I don't like. You gave me like this really gross visual. Like,
Sorry.
Yeah, actually, there was a couple years ago, and I'm sure it still happens. They were using bags of salt or pouring them into storm drains to prevent freezing. Or there was some where there was some freezing, and they're dumping bags of salt right in the storm drain. It's like, oh, it just makes you cringe, but. Yeah, it's like, I get they don't want it to freeze up because that's got to be difficult. Well, right, maybe it's not.
Actually,
Like, maybe it's fine that it's frozen?
It's wastewater.
Yeah. Well, but you would think salt is pretty corrosive. That's going to eat away the plastic and anything that it's.
anything in there, like.
Yeah.
Seems like a good idea, right? So let's all do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably words.
Yeah, somebody did it. Well, that's good. I hadn't thought about that. I know gas stations is like on my radar. Every time you go to a gas station, they just have so much salt around those pumps. Like slip on it so much. It's like on roller skates all of a sudden. Yes.
I'm from Metropolitan Council. I'm Deborah Manning, and one of the reasons why there's a number of reasons that we're interested in chloride, but one is because of the impact and the potential for wastewater reuse. Get this higher chloride, you have a potential user who wants to do cooling water, and they can't, or they have to do reverse osmosis, which does not solve anything, right?
Right.
So there may be some links there of people who are, kind of not necessarily promoting, but they're working on a wastewater reuse. And it's kind of the circular problem that if we can address, we have more potential for that. Which would be a good thing. Be an interesting connection. One of the things that we're looking at, one of the motivators.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, because we have thought about the, like using, stormwater ponds for irrigation. There was, I think it was Mid-Milwaukee and Sioux had all these plans to do that. And then the water was really high in chloride and was killing their plants. And so now they had to install a very expensive RO system on their irrigation
And what do
system.
you
So
do
it
with
didn't really work out for them.
the brine from that?
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. Yeah.
And from the air side, I don't know if you guys have looked into it, but any facility that burns coal, if they have a coal pile, runoff or track out from that.
Okay, that was a good idea. I'd be interested to learn more about the details of the coal.
They sample in the air or the water?
They sample their actual coal before they burn it, so they know what their coal content is in the coal, which then helps them calculate their emissions. So like my facility has a hydrogen chloride limit on it. And that's part of their calculations in complying with it.
I had no idea. That's so great. Love when those new connections are made. All right, I have like a bunch of stuff. Oh, my thing went to sleep or. Okay, whoa. So we do have a smart salting training program. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. I'm actually just going to skip right to, we have an awesome new training for property management. So, everyone should know about that. And here's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So you noticed on that bar chart we have the red. So kind of here's our future is we have to transition the training over to the MPCA. Because historically it was a 319 grant with a consultant. And they really did all of the work. We got graded tests, support staff entered all those names into a Excel spreadsheet, and we posted it on the website. So our involvement in the training has been pretty minimal. So we're going to have to take a much larger role in that. And so one of that is we have a new staff person, which Angie wasn't able to join me today. So I've got a nice little slide here. Angie Bergash is our new Smart Salting Training Coordinator. She's been at the agency for 16 years now, and she was in our Small Business Assistance Program prior to working with me now on chloride. So she brings a really great background in working with businesses, providing marketing and education. And so I think she'll be so far she's already been a valuable asset to the program. I can help get her up to speed on chloride. So it's really great to have her on board. So right now we're kind of transitioning. We're trying to kind of ease in with the partners because a lot of partners are kind of panicking, like, wait a minute, MPCA is taking over the training. Like, that can't be good. Right? Like, I'm sure they're going to screw it up. So we're trying to ease it, be like, no, you're still going to work with Fortin. You're a key partner. You're always going to be a partner. We're not like taking over. We're going to make a partnership process. I'm going to formalize and have a smart salting advisory team that will advise the training and I want them to stay as committed and working on this because it's been a very partnership approach. Sometimes one of the first things Angie's working on is some of the marketing we do for the trainings. People don't know, they think, and this has been a problem in the last couple of years of the legislature. Well, why do we have to get MPCA money for this training program? All these local partners have them. Scott County and Dakota County, they have their own training. I was like, no, they don't. It's our training. We all just partner together. And so I've seen a couple of instances now where I'm like, okay, we need to do a better job of making it clear that it is the MPCA's training, but we're just one of many partners, but we're just kind of the lead role in this training, but it's a partnership training. Because definitely we don't want to, it's pretty important. We need the funds. So I don't want there to be a bunch of confusion out there on whose training it is. So one thing that she just did, if you're interested, you can go to our Smart Salting webpage and you can subscribe to our brand new newsletter. So she just sent one out this week. We talk about upcoming trainings, the new salt symposium that's going to be coming up in August. We've got a great success story. And so if you guys have any content, my vision is this will be wastewater too. Right now we're focusing on just the training, but smart salting is everything, right? We're going to be smart about all of our salt. So I'm envisioning that we can use this for water softening and other kind of wastewater related use too, and fertilizer, whatever sources of salt. So right now though, the focus is on the training, but if you guys have ideas for content, please let Angie know. We've got a great tool. Yeah.
I just have we sent our first variance application to EPA, so they actually have a physical packet. Kudos, Elise. on that one.
Yeah, that was, I know, a several year effort.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. That's kind of the domino. Probably, I would expect within 10, 20 years, we'll have 50, 60 chloride variances in Minnesota, maybe more than that.
So it's exciting. So you're saying Elise is gonna be busy for the next 10 years? Yeah, so no, that's great. And that's where I'm connecting with these guys so that we can like work with those communities who are considering variances. So like, what assistance can I offer and help? I don't, maybe I can't, but I'd like to try. We have a tool that, you know, helps people to evaluate where they can reduce fluoride for winter maintenance. And right now we have a project starting where we're going to expand that. We're going to start with a source assessment. We're going to use available GIS and other information that's publicly available and help a community. They'll go onto a map, pick their watershed or their city boundary, and they will get a pie chart that says, here's how much of your salt is coming from these different sources. Now, it's going to be an estimate based on the best available information, but we're going to have a spreadsheet they can download so that if they know, okay, no, I actually have tested chloride from this industrial discharger. I know that it's higher than that, or I actually track the amount of de-icing salt that we use, so we're going to change that number. We're not going to use the default value for application rates. And then we're going to add all these new categories. So I'm super excited. We're going to add, we're already working on what can you do about water softening. We've already got some in there for dust control, and then industrial discharge and fertilizer are on the list. We'll see how far we can get on those with this current contract. But I'm really excited about this. So right now we're just designing what would the framework look like. What is the details of like the, you know, all that IT, you know, what platform is it and stuff that I'm like, I don't know what you guys tell me. And so we're going to get that ready. And then the phase 2 will actually be to build it and start testing it out. And then my phase 3 vision is to connect this with our regulatory programs and like wastewater in particular. They have to do some reporting if they have a chloride limit. How can we get them to use this tool? And then when they enter all their information, that produces a report that they can submit to us that we've already that we know we've approved what's in there, and so that they have an easy format and they know exactly what we're looking for. So I'd also like to consider that for the MS4 program. Like if there's reports they need to submit, how can we just get them to use the tool, and then when they're done, they get this report that they can just hit submit to MS4 program. So I'd love to be able to connect with the various permitting programs to figure out how we can make that happen. All right, so one other, why does this keep, oh, Mark, are you?
Looking at comments, we have a comment online for you, actually.
That's Mark.
Has there been any consideration to educate the general public about new tire segment on all weather tires? Tires that can be left on your car all year and provide nearly as much traction as true winter tires. So the comment getting at how can we reduce salt by getting at it indirectly through promoting different kind of traction in tires.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think there's a lot of opportunities like that. Same thing with like the water softeners, right? We're talking about these more salt efficient water softeners and getting homeowners to better understand how their water softeners work. I think the same thing could go with tires. But that's great information to kind of share with, when I was meeting with watershed partners, you know, trying to kind of work with them because I think they're a better connector with the public than the state is. I will continue to utilize our resources, but I think they have a more direct connection and a lot of times a more trusting relationship with those who live in their watersheds. So trying to work with cities and communities to help get them the information they need to do some of this education outreach to hopefully make a stronger connection. I wanted to touch briefly, we have created some model ordinances. I don't have anybody who's adopted them yet, but a lot of cities are asking me, well, has anybody done it yet? So I have not heard like, no, this is crazy, like we would never do that. I'm hearing like, well, has anyone else done it yet? Like they think they're interested, but they don't maybe want to be the first ones to do it. So these are model ordinances that is optional that anyone can choose to do. We have one for basically requiring anybody who applies salt in their community would have to be certified. The second one is anybody who stores salt in their community would need to store it properly. The third one, actually 9 Mile Creek Watershed District and Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District already have it in their watershed rules that if they're going to do any land disturbance activities, they need to have a chloride management plan and a point of contact who has been trained in smart salting practices. So that has actually been effective. I get a lot of calls. I can tell I get some frantic contractors. They're like, hey, when's the next requirement for I was like, oh, it's gonna be in a week, so here you go, you can sign up. And then the fourth one is to sweep up. So after a storm, they applied way too much salt, they have to come back and clean it up. We can't just leave it there and hope, wait till it just pollutes all our water, get it out of there. So these are official ordinances that we have on our website that anyone can adopt, but you can also kind of do these as policies. So Metro Transit and the City of Minneapolis actually are requiring through their bidding process, anybody who is going to bid on work that they might hire out to be certified under the training program. So that's another kind of more indirect way to kind of start to implement this policy. We also created a water softening rebate guide. So the idea was to lump this in with the ordinances, but I quickly learned from my technical advisory committee that there wasn't much appetite for a water softening ordinance. So we switched to doing a rebate guide. So this is for cities like the city of Lakefield, who is looking to do a rebate program, a step-by-step guide of what are the things they need to think about, and kind of what are some ideas. And then at the end, we have all of these other communities across the country who have implemented a rebate program. We've got their website, their contact information, so they have somebody who they can call and reach out to as they explore this idea. We also got some clean water funds last session. I've got $200,000 that I'll be giving out in a grant for a water softening rebate program. So I'm just meeting with contract staff to start figuring out the details of what that's going to be and thinking about what the criteria will be for who will be eligible, but it will be communities. My target is like Altura, these small wastewater communities who need to do something about chloride but have very limited resources. So I'd like to get this grant funds to communities who need to do something about chloride, and we think that water softening rebate program could be the best way to get there. So that will be coming hopefully, in the next, I'm hoping by the end of summer that I will have a RFP out. Clean Water Partnership Loans, another existing program that we found chloride connections to. So this would be a loan that is available. So Lakefield is our first city to put in a loan request and receive a loan to do a rebate program. So they are moving to RO at their water treatment plant, and they want to have a rebate program to eliminate all the water softeners from the home because they've decided that's the only way they can meet their chloride limit. So I actually just had a meeting with them this last week to kind of help them work through the initial ideas of how they would start a rebate program and how that's going to work for them. So we have a small business assistance loan program that we are encouraging folks to utilize. I just met with a bunch of water softening companies 2 Mondays ago and educated them on this because they would be the vendors then. So they can tell their customers, hey, you need a new water softener. If you upgrade to this very efficient water softening model with brine reclamation, you can use an MPCA loan to pay for that. So hopefully that'll be a good connection because we want to get as many folks as possible utilizing these loan funds. And then I've got some pictures here of equipment that could be purchased by a small business. So these private snow and ice companies, if they want to invest in these rotary brooms, which are a fantastic mechanical removal tool, they can utilize the loan money to pay for that. Okay. I mean, that's about it. The rest of this is just I could probably talk for 3 hours. So we're not going to go through additional resources, but there's a website, there's all kinds of other stuff, but that's the gist of the programs we're working on, the things I've been up to, and that's it. Anybody has questions or wants to talk more about it. Thank you guys all for coming.
I'm Brett. I read